Hey everyone, welcome back to Symbiotic. I'm Grim.
Hey y'all, Friendly Neighborhood Steve here, and on this episode we're gonna do my story. So yeah.
Yep. So, Friendly Neighborhood Steve.
Yeah, buddy.
Kind of childhood traumas did you go through, and how did that affect your addiction?
Fuck, man.
Yeah.
You just had to go there.
Starting heavy.
Yeah, man, that is heavy, but that's all right. That's all right, man. So like, so some of my like earliest memories were, my mom having a couple of boyfriends, one after the other, one named Michael, one named Roy, and they like to put their hands on me in a physical way, not sexual, but they basically beat my ass every chance they got. Michael once threw my kitten out of a 2-story window into a dumpster.
Oh wow.
Yeah, man. But luckily she was fine. Got her. Ran downstairs, grabbed her out of the dumpster, and brought her back inside. She was shaking, but she was all right. And that was all because I couldn't tie my shoes. I was probably 5 at the time, maybe even younger. But yeah, so that asshole came and went, and next up was Roy, and I learned what switches were. I learned what kneeling on rice was. I would have to hand pick stuff out of a carpet on my hands and knees, and I had to do these ridiculous pool exercises with him because he was I guess trying to make me tougher. I was a sensitive kid. I was nerdy. I was socially awkward. I was just a fucking weirdo. So he, I guess, in his own sick, twisted way, was trying to toughen me up. A lot of it by cruel punishments and over the top punishments. He'd fucking spank me until my ass was black and blue, and use a belt and use a switch, and so there's that, and then I suffered from depression and anxiety my whole life, for as long as I can remember. I didn't get diagnosed though till I got into recovery, so I've gone my whole life just kind of dealing with it. And at the age of 9, I tried hanging myself, and the knot came undone, and the branch broke, smacked me on the head while I was out of, hitting the ground, and knocked the wind out of me, man. And the only thought that I had was fuck, dude, I can't even kill myself right. I can't do anything right, and next attempt was 12. I got caught cutting myself, so my grandma sent me to a hospital. I spent a month in there, where I basically had to tell my mom, not only was I cutting myself, but I was drinking and doing speed and smoking pot and just anything I could get my hands on. I was stealing money from my grandma to pay for it, and smoking cigarettes. I was 12 years old, and I was just over the top at the time, and so there was that, and then Hurricane Katrina happened, so we, my mom shipped me and my sister from New Orleans to Reno here to live with my dad, and by the time I was 13, I was drinking with him, so there was that. I guess in his own way, he was kind of trying to teach me how to responsibly drink. I I guess that backfired. So just a little, and yeah. So like my last suicide attempt was at 15, and I was trying to cut my femoral artery, and I had just missed it, but I cut something, and fucking bled everywhere, passed out, and came back to. My sheets were soaked, my fucking mattress was soaked, through with blood, so I had to like flip my mattress and like burn my sheets because there was no way getting those clean. And that was luckily my last attempt, and that kind of wraps up the like childhood trauma, yeah.
Well, how has your addiction progressed through your adulthood life, and what have you done since then to try to manage it?
For sure. So in high school, I was I used to brag about my hobby being drugs. We would drink and smoke pot during the weekdays, and then on the weekends we'd go ham, and we'd be doing like ecstasy or acid or mushrooms or some kind of combination, or we were doing uppers, we were doing downers. We had a childhood friend that whose mom used to make this shit called magic dust. That was it was a mix of like Vicodin, morphine, Percocet, just all these muscle relaxers and painkillers, and she used to mix it up, and then she used to like line up lines and then bring it to us and like feed us like baby birds with drugs, and she always had a handle of vodka available, and that was kind of just free to do whatever you want with, and she'd just buy another one, and she'd always pay for pot. So like we were just kind of loaded all the way through high school and into our early 20s. By the time I was 21 though, I kind of knocked off all the pills and stuff like that, except for like psychedelics, and now I could go to bars, and so I spent every night just bar hopping. And then that same year I turned 21, my mom passed away from breast cancer, and at that point I said fuck it for sure, and I jumped into a whiskey bottle and closed the cork behind me and stayed there for about 10 years. I was pretty solid drunk for 10 years. At no point in that 10 years was I not drunk, drinking, or hungover and about to drink. I destroyed relationships, I destroyed friendships, I didn't give a fuck, I blacked out, I was a blackout or pass out drinker every single night, so it was like either I killed the bottle and passed out, or I just drank until I blacked out, and so it wasn't so even like getting married didn't get me sober, getting my wife pregnant didn't get me sober, having my son born didn't get me sober. Like nothing could relieve me of my alcoholism. Like, and I knew I had a problem. I just, part of me didn't know what to do, and then the other part of me didn't care. So I just I'd go through this vicious cycle of like I'd black out and act a fool, and then I'd wake up and apologize to my wife and tell her that I would be better, and then I like wouldn't drink for a week, and then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, one night a beer, second night 2 beers, third night some shooters, fourth night a pint, fifth night a fifth, sixth night a handle, and then that seventh night I'd black out again, and then I'd just wash, rinse, repeat, just didn't know how to get myself help, and I was afraid of admitting that I was an alcoholic, because at that point I knew I was going to have to quit. So if I had admitted that, then I was going to have to go to AA, or go to rehab or detox. And I was, part of me was just holding on to the fact of, like, I wanted to drink, so fuck it. And finally, I destroyed my marriage. My wife left me for a second time, and at that point I drank myself until I lost my car, lost my apartment, was on the streets, Carson City, went up to Tahoe for a month, and was kind of homeless, but like staying with a friend while I was like kind of trying to get back on my feet. And then that didn't work out, so I came back to Reno, and nothing worked out there, so I was back on the streets. And then I had a weekly for about 3 weeks where I just completely disappeared, and I wouldn't leave my room unless I was buying a bottle. And I just disappeared off the face of the earth for like over a month. So during all that, I didn't answer calls from family, I didn't answer calls from friends, I didn't respond on Facebook, I wasn't on social media. So my sister and my dad thought I was dead. So my sister was putting out missing persons posts on social media, and so was my uncle. And then my dad was driving around in the seediest parts of Reno looking for my dead body in a gutter. So, there was that. And after that 3 weeks, I had run out of money. I didn't have, I had a nickel to my name, and so I couldn't pay rent in my weekly anymore. And I decided that I was going through withdrawals and stuff too, and so I was trying to call around to places that I could take loans out from, and little did I know, Blackout Me had taken out every loan in town. And I call them and be like, hey, I want to take out a loan, and they're like, hey dude, you owe us money. And I'm like, fuck. So I packed my shit, went downstairs to the weekly, and I went outside and was just like, what now? And this is it. Like, you officially not only found rock bottom, but you discovered it had a basement, and then in that basement you found a shovel. So I gave myself an ultimatum. I told myself, look, Steve, you can either go left, and you can let this disease either kill you or let somebody kill you, because either way you're gonna die. Or you can go right and get help and swallow your pride and ego, and be vulnerable and stuff like that. So I did the latter, and I spent the next half an hour walking like 5 blocks, dry heaving the whole way, sweating bullets, shaking like a dog shit in razor blades, and got to my first, got to the program, and went upstairs to fill out an application. I could barely write my pen, barely write my name, much less hold a pen. And the lady looked at me, in layman's terms, she was like, you look like dog shit. Have you detoxed? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. So they took me to a detox center, and then when I got out, I went back to the program, and I got 46 days sober before they caught me drinking. I then went on a bender, and then I went back to the detox center, and I got into another program, and I got 57 days. In fact, it's right around the corner from where we're sitting here. But then I started drinking again, and I went on another bender, and Went to another program that lasted 10 days because I was in quarantine and all I could think about was drinking for 10 days. And so when the quarantine was lifted on me, you know, they were like, go out and look for a job and don't come back until you do. And I was like, fuck you guys. And I donated and bought myself a pint, paid my phone bill, and went on another bender. And I got into another program, and I was able to get a year and a half through this program. You know, it worked miracles for me. I made a lot of friends, made a lot of progress in my recovery. You know, and then time ran out, and I didn't have enough money saved, so, you know, got sent packing and had nowhere to go, so I just decided to go back on a bender. And then you know, I moved into the homeless shelter and tried living there, and after about a month I realized that, you know, I couldn't do this anymore. You know, my sister had been telling me to come live with her, and I was telling her no, like, I'll figure this out and I'll get back on my feet through the shelter. But then I realized in that month that all I had been doing was drinking to cope with the fact that the the shelter was a nightmare. And so I called her and, you know, went to live with my sister for a few months. And, you know, I was in a super deep depressive state, and you know, I started drinking again, so I had to leave. And I went back to the previous program where I had a year and a half, and I spent 9 months there. And then I met a girl, moved out to Susanville, California, had a mental breakdown, drank, got back on the wagon, and I had a year sober before, you know, me and this girl decided to part ways, and she decided to take everything from me. So I was left homeless again. So, you know, I said, fuck it, what's the point? And went on another week-long bender, went back to the shelter, detoxed there, knew that I deserved better, so I was trying to do better. And here we are. I'm in a sober transitional living program with 41 days sober, 17 days in AA, with over 45 to 50 meetings in the past 17 days. Yeah, dude, that kind of like sums it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, how has your experiences, I should say, affected your approach to recovery?
So, at one point I was a PRSS, and that's a peer recovery support specialist, and basically what they do is they're unofficial therapists that help those in early recovery kind of build their foundation on which they can build their house of sobriety upon, you know. And I loved that, and I always did research. You know, I learned a ton about mental health disorders, I learned a ton about addiction, I learned about therapeutic communities, I learned about neuroscience and how, like, depression affects the brain, you know, anxiety affects the brain. I learned, you know, that little things like creatine and fish oil will, you know, help alleviate depression just because of how it works in your brain after you take it. Like, you know, I just kept researching because I find recovery fascinating. So, you know, at this point I believe in multiple pathways of recovery. You know, not only are there 12-step programs like AA and NA, you know, there's Dharma recovery, refuge recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery. There's so many options out there for you to work with on your recovery. You know, you can lean on the church if that works for you. You can lean on your family if that works for you. And the way I see it is like, as long as you can stay sober, you know, do what you need to survive and thrive. You know, stop surviving and thrive in your sobriety. And yeah, that kind of is my approach these days. You know, the only you know, I'm a member of AA, and you know, the only rule for that program is a desire to stop drinking. You know, other than that, it's kind of, they give you tools to work with, such as the big book and a sponsor, and you know, the 12 steps, 12 traditions, the 12 principles. And you know, it's basically up to you to kind of figure out what works best. So yeah, that's a little bit of, you know, I hope I answered your question.
No, absolutely you did. And what advice for anyone going through the process of recovery now? What advice would you give them, especially the newcomer?
Well, a lot of it's cliche, but it's cliche because it works. You know, take it a day at a time. And even like sometimes when that day seems like too much, you know, take it hour by hour, or take it minute by minute. Do what you need to, and develop coping skills. You know, coping skills are tools to help you, and build up your toolbox. You know, it's going to be a never-ending process, you know, in your journey of recovery. Like no one recovers from their addiction. You know, we just learn to live with it in a sober manner. You know, so you know, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be building on these skills, and building my toolbox. You know, and when something happens, I break one of them out. You know, and you know, just like a toolbox, there's all kinds of different tools. You know, not everything is going to work for every problem. You know, like you know, breathing techniques are not going to work for everything. You know, playing the tape backwards and forward isn't going to help all the time. Checking the facts isn't always going to work, you know, but those are just a couple of simple ones, you know. I'd also say build a support system, you know, make friends, make connections, because the opposite of addiction is connection, you know. So have hobbies, be yourself, you know. After you start getting sober, discover who you are. You know, it took me a while to find out who I was again, because my entire personality was consumed by alcohol, and so I didn't know who Steve was anymore. So I you know, after I found out, I like grew out my hair, started dressing the way I wanted to, started putting piercings in my face. You know, I just wanted to be able to express myself and be myself, you know, and not care what others thought. And you know, that works. You know, I have so many friends now, and you know, people in recovery that I can count on. You know, I have a pack. You know, I learned from, you know, an interview with somebody famous, and he said that only 3% of us make it, but of that 3%, it's those who stick together that make it. So imagine a pack of gazelles, you know, being chased by lions. You know, they're going to pick off the sick and the weak. So you have to have a pack. And anybody that gets sick and weak, you need to wrap around them and lift them up, you know, type of a deal. And so that's what I have, you know. Grim here's part of my pack. Shadow's part of my pack. You know, we have multiple members in our pack, and we lean on each other. You know, when one of us is having a rough day, we have a pack chat in which we we communicate, and if we're not having the best day, then we let others know, and then somebody reaches out and gives you a call or sends you a text message and it's like, hey dude, let's talk, let's go to a meeting, let's figure this out. And we stay strong in that way. And that's one of the ways that I'm maintaining my sobriety. These people are there for life, and then I have people in the fellowship that I can call on and be like, hey man, like I need a ride, and stuff like that. And because of their selflessness, that they're willing to help me. And that's another thing, is just be of service. Try to be 1% better than you were yesterday. There's a book about that. And just be better than you were yesterday, just by a little. Maybe that's complimenting somebody, maybe that's opening the door for somebody, maybe that's telling somebody good morning when you walk past them. Just simple things. And then you do that 1% for 100 days, then you're 100 days better than you were 3 months ago. And it a lot of it seems so simple because it is simple. This isn't complicated. It just requires diligent work. You can't just spend 30 days in a rehab and then you're just done and you can be sober for the rest of your life. This takes daily maintenance. You have to constantly work on this. I go to a meeting a day. I start at, first meeting is at 6:45 in the morning. I am there, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to go, and it jazzes me up and stuff like that. And then I go to another meeting right after that at 8:15, and that one's a little calmer, so that lets me slip into a cool mood, and I get to have intellectual conversations with the constant members. There's only like 8 or 10 of us that go to that 8:15 meeting, but we get really deep when it comes to the topics that we choose for our meeting. And I don't know, I think that kind of wraps up like that as far as advice for newcomers. Just keep going. It doesn't matter how many times you fall, it's as long as you can get back up one more time. You can fall 100 times, but get back 101 and you'll be okay. And if you fall off the wagon, if you slip, if you slide, then it's okay. When you go on a hike and you're going up a mountain and you trip and fall, you don't fall all the way down the mountain. You know what I mean? You don't just start over from the beginning of the hike because you fell down. You get back up, you dust yourself off, and you continue where you left off. And it's the same thing with recovery. Just because you went back out, or you slipped, or you slid, or something like that, then you didn't lose all the experience you gained in the past. That's why I tell people that I have 4 years in recovery and 41 days sober, because for 4 years I've been working on myself diligently. And just because I used doesn't mean that I am not, that whole journey of healing doesn't disappear.
You didn't lose the value that you gained.
No, not at all. Yeah, no. I have tons of experience in the past 4 years, of working on myself, that I can, pass on to other people and help other people. And I'm always trying to be of service and help those and my fellow man. I want to make my city better. I want to make my country better. I want to make the world better. But it all starts, with just me waking up and being close to my higher power, and searching that higher power for guidance, and just trying to be the best man I could possibly be today.
You have Any additional words of wisdom before we wrap up?
You know, be patient. Patience is a virtue, and it's one of the most important things to me in recovery, because sometimes you just gotta stop and you gotta pray, or you gotta stop and you gotta think. And if you don't have patience, you're not gonna know how to stop. You're just gonna go, and chances are you're gonna make mistakes. So if you just stop, think, be patient with yourself, be patient with others, then you'll gain so much more. It's kind of like the rabbit and the tortoise. Slow and steady wins the race, and that's true when it comes to recovery. None of us are gonna get years at a time. We're not gonna jump forward in time and just have 5 years in recovery. No, you got to do it day by day by day by day by day, and then next thing you know, you look back and you got 20 years. So yeah, that's I don't know. I think that's all I got, at least for this episode.
Well, thanks for opening up. Thanks for allowing yourself to be vulnerable for our benefit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate appreciate us doing this, and I hope that it helps somebody. If I can just help one person with this episode, then it makes it all worth it.
That's it, man. It's just one person. That's why we do what we do here. But I believe that's all the time we have. I am Grim. This is Symbiotic.
Friendly Neighborhood Steve here.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Thank y'all.